going to begin with the mass shooting here in Southern California. The massacre striking terror into the Asian American community as it celebrated the Lunar New Year. Now, investigators are saying that the gunman shot and killed himself inside this white cargo van that you're looking at right now when police finally caught up to him hours after the rampage. The sheriff has identified the shooter as 72-year-old Hu Can Tran. This all began Saturday night. The sheriff says Tran opened fire at a ballroom dance studio here in Monterey Park, killing 10 people and wounding 10 others. And we're told that he then went to another dance hall in a nearby city, Alhambra, where some quick-thinking bystanders jumped into action and took away his gun. But he managed to escape in his van. Now, the sheriff says the gunman was the gun was a semi-automatic pistol, which he believes is illegal here in California. Investigators are still piecing together the motive, but CNN is learning that the suspect was a regular patron at the dance studio that he attacked, and that's where he met his ex-wife. Kyung joins me live here on the scene as we stand in front of this. Kyung, this is a very disturbing story. No rhyme or reason. 3 different locations.
Very difficult to understand, especially for this community, because this was the first Lunar New Year celebration, the festival for the city, the very first one since COVID. A chance for this community to reconnect, to re-engage after all of this anti-Asian racism, only to have one of their own commit this heinous crime.
What I want to do here is to say to the community, feel safe. You are no longer in danger.
The Monterey Park shooting suspect is dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound following a police standoff Sunday. Law enforcement tracked a white cargo van that fit the description of a vehicle of interest from the shooting. For hours, SWAT officers tried to get the occupant of the vehicle to surrender until what officers believe was a gunshot heard from inside the vehicle.
Homicide detectives are working around the clock, gathering additional information and working on determining the motive behind this extremely tragic event.
Law enforcement sources tell CNN the suspect may have sought medical treatment shortly before the standoff.
This is unbelievable. This is terrible.
To see this happen in this place is shattering.
The 72-year-old alleged shooter opened fire at a dance studio where the city's large Asian American community was celebrating the Lunar New Year Saturday night.
Additional units requested, multiple victims, gunshot wounds.
The gunman then left the scene and targeted another neighboring dance studio with a semi-automatic weapon before it was wrestled away from him.
The suspect went to the Alhambra location after he conducted the shooting, and he was disarmed by 2 community members who I consider to be heroes because they saved lives.
The alleged shooter is Asian American and believed to have acted alone. He was a regular patron of the Star Ballroom Dance Studio, even meeting his ex-wife there, according to 3 people who knew him.
I have confidence that we will get over this crisis, because we must, and we will only do so if we do it together as a community.
10 people were pronounced dead at the scene, making this mass shooting the deadliest since the Uvalde Elementary School shooting last May. The sheriff described many of the victims as likely being in their 50s, 60s, or older. This tragedy marks the 33rd mass shooting so far this year, according to the Gun Violence Archive.
Gun violence needs to stop. And I hope that this tragedy doesn't just go on a long list of many others that we don't even talk about until the next one comes up.
We are getting a stunning eyewitness view from that second dance studio, the one in Alhambra, just near this Monterey Park location. Brandon Say tells the New York Times, and he's the one who wrestled the gun away from this gunman. He tells the New York Times, quote, "He was looking at me and looking around, not hiding that he was trying to do harm. His eyes were menacing from his body language, his facial expression, his eyes. He was looking for people." And that gun, Don, is what eventually got police tracking unraveling this entire case.
Oh, it's interesting because they said that the gun is what got them unraveling, as you said, the entire case. But they're saying that the gun was illegal here in California, but I wonder if it was modified and how they were able to identify him through the gun, if it was an illegal gun. But those are details that we'll find out as the investigation continues. I want you to stand by, Kyung. With your reporting, I want to bring in now retired LAPD Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey. Thank you, Sergeant, for joining us. We really appreciate it this morning. Your assessment, we've been saying we're going to talk about the law enforcement response to this, but make sense of this. Is there any way to make sense of three different locations? Was there anger? Was there hate? What is going on here? Because he is an Asian American.
Well, you know what my gut tells me is that he had beef with that particular community. I mean, we understand now that all of the victims were basically his contemporaries, people who were in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so before I knew factually that he actually was a frequent visitor at this particular dance hall, that he had a familial relationship, his ex-wife, having met her there, I knew that there was something personal about those two locations. He went to Monterey Park first, did what he did there, and then tried to duplicate that in Alhambra, but for those heroic people who took the gun away from him, prevented another tragedy from occurring there. And so we'll have to find out the why, because that's the thing that everybody wants to know, is why he acted out the way that he did.
Let's talk about this weapon, because it is a semi-automatic pistol. It is believed that they were able to figure out who he was through the pistol, but then the sheriff, LA County Sheriff Richard Luna, saying that it was illegal here in California. Can you help us put that together?
It doesn't really make sense to me, right? If it's an illegal gun, then that would make me think that he possessed it illegally. He was able to obtain it illegally, therefore there wouldn't be a record, right? He wouldn't be a real registered owner that we would be able to track as we would if the gun had been purchased legally at a gun store and the like. So I'm very curious as to how they were able to reconcile the two.
Everything is very close together. If you look at where the police station or city hall is, you look at here where we're standing in front of the Star Dance Studio here in Monterey Park. It's very small. Police were here within 3 minutes. What do you think of their response?
Well, obviously, you know, LA County Sheriff's is a large agency, much like LAPD, and we train for these kinds of situations. The officers did exactly what it is that they're trained and taught to do, and we saw something very similar when the SWAT officers engaged the suspect in Torrance. And so thankfully, not more harm occurred. The officers were able to quickly ascertain what they needed in terms of identifying the vehicle that the person was in, getting pictures and putting that out there so that everyone within southern Los Angeles could be on the lookout for this van and the suspect.
Yeah, they were able to apprehend him within less than 24 hours. It's interesting to me as well that the LA County Sheriff, at least the Lunar Park, I should say, police chief, talked about these are young officers who had been on the job for maybe training, had 7 months or so total.
You know, what a lot of people don't know about the LA County Sheriffs is that most of them start off in the jails, right? You start off working as a detention officer, you're in the jail, and then after so many years, you kind of get your stripes, if you will, and you come out into the street and you work patrol. So it's not uncommon to encounter an officer, a deputy, who really doesn't have a lot of street experience, but yet these officers were clearly well trained and relied on that training and knew exactly what to do in this instance. They didn't hesitate for a moment and saved lives, no doubt.
One of the words he used yesterday is that they had not been prepared for the carnage that they saw, and that was extensive.
How can you? I mean, even a veteran officer probably would have been shaken to their core to see the kind of death and destruction that went on in that town, in that dance hall. And so the fact that these officers were young on the job certainly doesn't speak to their inexperience. You know, they knew what to do, they were well trained, and they acted on that.
It just speaks to the trauma that the community is feeling here. The victims of that trauma and police are part of they're victimized as well by this. Kyung, you're part of the Asian American community here, and if you don't mind a personal story, because you're familiar with the community, your mother even was preparing to go to some of these Lunar New Year celebrations.
Well, we were here this weekend on Saturday, the day before the shooting. So my mother lives about 5-10 minutes away from Monterey Park. I mean, these are the restaurants. My grocery store is here. The Costco has Asian American items all over the place. Here in Monterey Park, it is as if the entire Asian diaspora is connected and moving together. You can eat in one block a Chinese meal, a Korean meal, a Japanese meal. You can shop, and everyone is insulated. And I'm guilty of this too. When you are here among your own people, you let down your guard. So were there signs? Did people see something? Did they even know what they were? And we already talk about looking for the signs of a mass shooter in our elementary schools. Right. So did anyone see anything? And did they know how to communicate it to the police? And we were just chatting about, if you don't know how to talk to the police, if they don't speak your same language, talk to your kids so that they can communicate for you.
All the city leaders here are saying, including the LA County Sheriff, saying that people should feel safe because the person who committed this is no longer with us, but there is definitely no longer a sense of celebration that had just, been in place here over the weekend. Kyung, thank you, Sergeant. Thank you. We appreciate it.